I did it again. It's 10:04 on Saturday morning. I've gone to Twitter. Some people call it X now. Gone to Twitter, Anthony Precourt's account. I've checked for green smoke. The green smoke from December 31st is still there. I hate myself for doing that.
Well, I feel like I blame myself too. I should have said it could happen on Friday. I got ahead of myself. He's definitely leaving Monterrey. Um,
We think.
the tangibles of the difference between Brandon Vàzquez joining Austin over San Jose are beyond obvious. There is nothing uncertain in the language about San
hmm
Jose being out of the running. It would take a Blackburn Rovers level screw up of some sort involving a submit and a save button. At this point, it's just annoying to wait. We know it's happening now, but at the same time, we also don't want to curse it by being too hopeful about a thing that we do have the kind of demonstrable it's definitely happening. Because what happened when we got our hopes up way too much with Fafa Pico, Phil? What happened? We cursed it.
It was like getting coal for Christmas.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. This is our first one of 2025. Took the vacation off. We are back. And as you saw from that cold open there, we are definitely raring to go to talk about Brandon Vàzquez. Wrote nearly 3,500 words with help of some fine journalists who cover FC Cincinnati and CF Monterrey a few days ago as we were awaiting this news, which we are still waiting for. Green smoke, which we are still watching for. Don't be fooled. The green smoke from December 31st for Ilie Sánchez is not the green smoke that we are waiting for now for Brandon Vàzquez. Moisés, how are you doing today?
Great. If you had told me a month ago that
Mhm.
Austin FC players Ilie Sánchez and Brandon Vàzquez were the focus of everyone's chatter and conversation, aside from theoretical transfer rumors about Sebastian Driussi. I don't know
Mhm.
that I would have believed you if you
Right.
told me that a month ago. I don't know that I would have dared to dream, because a month ago we were daring to dream about mid-30s strikers moving into the sunset of the prime of their retirement years. I'm baffled that we are where we are. I'm happy that we are where we are because of what it
Mhm.
bodes for the season to come. But I just want that. I just want that Verde smoke, man. I just want that smoke.
I think we all do. Again, yeah, thinking about the offseason and thinking about the rebuilds that need to happen and what has happened so far. Again, the Fafa Pico thing, a little bit of a hiccup. Would have been good to have him here. I think he would have been helpful. I think he would have been useful. But certainly getting one and possibly two players if this Vasquez thing gets over the line, who are domestic players leaving three senior roster spots, three international spots to play with, and then needing probably a midfielder, maybe a winger, maybe a fullback, kind of hybrid winger type to round out the roster. No U22s are talked about yet or in, but could certainly be a possibility. Again, I guess we're going to know from this offseason how much Rodolfo Borrell really values U22s, since there are currently none on the roster and doesn't seem like any immediately on the horizon, but it's good. I think for this offseason and kind of what fans were hoping for, I think this is maybe a lot better than people had anticipated. Again, if you're just looking at Diego Rubio as the lone striker on the team, that's problematic, but with him behind Vasquez, that looks a whole lot better. And maybe, who knows, maybe there is a U22 striker that would also come into that mix there as well. I mean, again, three senior roster spots to play with. Again, I know that you were hopeful for Peter Grogan and what he can bring, but
Well,
we shall see.
I think let's talk about the U22 stuff for a sec, because where your piece got me thinking, because if you're listening to emergency podcast, you're listening to Verde All Day newsletter propaganda, literally.
Yes.
It, absolutely brilliant, wonderful deep dive on everything that one could want to know about the Brandon Vàzquez thing
Oh,
until we
thanks.
actually have confirmation that it's actually happening.
Right. And get to talk to him and stuff like that.
Exactly. What I think it sends me wondering is, looking at what we have roster wise, that there are no U22s. What that says to me goes back to something that Burrell said about the gulf between first team and second team MLS and MLS Next Pro, that it is a vast difference. And we have seen so many U22s that are the next hottest thing in MLS that turns out they were not the next hottest thing on team after team after team after team, not just Austin.
Yeah.
I feel like this is getting more to the status quo that Roto wants, which is if we're going to bring in a guy as a U22, he's going to have to prove himself first. He's going to have to actually play minutes, get used to the climate, and show that he's not going to just blow the tires off almost instantaneously as soon as he gets here and injure himself. Because those young guys, they can be super talented, but they can also be super good at not knowing how to pace themselves and how to take care of themselves, and will go way harder than they should because they're used to being young and invincible. I feel like the rumor of Vlad, what's his name, coming to the second team, looking at the second team as that player shelter to harbor young players, see how they work into the system, see how they work into the organization, give them rotational minutes in Open Cup, in Leagues Cup, in other midweek competitions. That's an opportunity to see if they're going to be worth it, rather than go, well, here's this U22 kid and he's definitely starting for us because we need it. We have no other choice. We have no other strikers. We have no other wingers. We have no other this. We have no other that.
Yeah.
We're seeing actual roster depth, which we're not used to.
I do think that if you have a player that's talented enough, again, there is that gulf between MLS and MLS Next Pro. I mean, if you have somebody who comes in who's really good, who's really talented, who's clearly above Next Pro, then I think that you can also work those players into the system. Again, just a reminder on the roster rules and why we're thinking about this and wondering about this is, again, MLS changed it to where there's a 2-tier declare your major at the start of the season sort of thing, where you have either 3 designated players, up to 3 U22s, and no additional GAM, or 2 designated players, 4 U22s, or up to 4 U22s, and then 2 million in GAM, which could, again, if you want to build a roster, you want to get some mid-level players in, and you have the roster flexibility to do that, you can do that. Again, I think with Vàzquez, we don't know yet about transfers and what that's going to entail. When he came from Cincinnati to Monterrey, it took 7.5 million in order to be able to do that. And it seems like maybe a good portion of that would need to come back the other way for Monterrey to be willing to let go of him. I know that there were some rumors about a mutual termination of contract, but that has not really materialized. Bogert seemed to report to the contrary. So again, I do think Vàzquez is going to come in as a designated player. I don't think there's any way with salary and with the, whatever transfer fee there is, that he's going to come in under that number, which I think is fine because, again, no U22s on the roster right now. If you get a pair of them who could be potential prospects and you don't need to lean on them, then I think that's fine at this stage. I mean, again, unless you shed more roster spots from bad contracts, players that would be going out maybe in the offseason this year versus not picking up the option at the end of this year or the end of next year, then I think maybe, yeah, there's a little bit more flexibility to do that. There's this other rumor that we're going to talk about for somebody who is a senior level international player. So I would probably guess no more than 2 U22s. Again, though, no reports, nothing we know of, no Rodney Redis type players who are coming in, as a reminder of what a U22 can be.
The next thing I was going to ask you was how you're feeling as we're in Vàzquez purgatory. Is it even possible to bring him in as a TAM player or something insane? And I guess we'll find out what happens when it happens, because you found out exclusively reporting about Sanchez. That was a Roto Burrell signature deal. It costs less than it was thought to be. But before we get off Vàzquez, I think it's interesting. I mentioned that when things were stalling out with Pico, that maybe, family stuff, I don't know. And people immediately were like, I don't even think he has a girlfriend. I'm like, well, that's not the only family that people have, but that is an important kind of family to worry about.
Right. Yeah.
because allegedly Vasquez's wife did not love Monterrey. Pico going to Miami because that's where he grew up and that's where he's got family. That makes sense.
Right.
And Vázquez looking at Austin as a place where a former teammate who's also a new father and other young fathers where he is going to get a lot of minutes. And as he wants to make sure that he keeps his spot on the U.S. men's national team, he's going to be under a head coach who was most recently an assistant coach for that U.S.
Right.
men's national team. So
And that
like,
helps. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
as certain as the rumors are, I feel like I get why, aside from the money, aside from the general nature of the community and that kind of thing, why it's a no-brainer to be coming here. Can we talk about Sanchez coming in and LA fans being salty about Austin picking up their captain as a free agent?
We can. I did want to say one more thing about Vasquez, though.
Yeah.
Again, it is a little bit of a dice roll. He did score 18 goals in 2022, had an all-star season, had some drop off from that. And Laura Fowler, really great FC Cincinnati reporter in that Vasquez piece, had a back and forth with her, and she explained some things about 23 in the system and maybe why that didn't work as well as 22. Some Columbus fan came in salty into my blue sky and said, oh, he's never scored more than 8 goals except for one season. So that's a little bit worrisome. But I mean, again, if he has a 12 to 15 goal season in 2025, then I think that's definitely a good foundation to build on in terms of thinking about the other players and how they're going to contribute and what he's going to do also to occupy center backs as well. It's not just that he's a goal scoring threat himself, but in terms of what he's going to do to free up Driussi, free up the wingers, again, assuming that Driussi is still here. Also contemplating the idea of maybe this is a 2-striker system. Maybe you have Driussi playing behind Vasquez. I mean, I had a really great kind of formation that I thought would work out, but it ended up involving 13 players. So that's not going to be possible. Again, there are going to be dangers with what you're going to try to do to fit Driussi in as a striker on this team aside Vasquez, but I do think that it is appealing. I do think that there is at least, maybe they should try it. Nico's going to have to figure that out. Nico, again, yeah, he did spend a lot of last year until he was dismissed in June, trying to get Peter Musa acclimated. Peter Musa had 5 goals by the time that Nico left, and then scored 11 of his 16 goals after that. So Musa did eventually come good, but not at a point where it would have saved Nico's job in Dallas. But maybe that all works out. Maybe it's good that Nico is here and Vasquez is joining him. Fingers crossed.
Well,
and like you said, that kind of USMNT connection also may be helpful. Interesting for fans too, I think.
You mentioned Peter Musa. Something that I mentioned to you a couple days ago is that people are like, oh, well, look, Peter Musa, he's great now that Nico's gone. Well, Nico had to completely rework their shape around this guy who got dropped on him by their sporting organization, who it's now rumored they are trying to sell him at a profit. And it's, oh, you give Brandon Vàzquez to Esteves and he'll ruin him. Esteves just got here. He just got here. They just stripped down parts of the roster. This is the second stripping down, and things are lean and mean, but it looks like they are getting the targeted pieces that they need in the places that they need them. And whether Driussi stays or goes, that's probably its whole own episode. But with a Sanchez and a Vàzquez in Austin's lineup, I'm not as worried about what happens if Driussi goes. And if he goes, there are definite positives to that on the financial side of things, on maybe the team chemistry side of things. Maybe his head just isn't in it here anymore. That isn't to say that if he is here for 2025, that he isn't going to have a great comeback after a couple of slump seasons. But yeah, Vàzquez and Sanchez don't make me as nervous about the prospect as I once was.
Yeah, for sure. And with Musa, again, they seem to be, again, I don't know necessarily, perhaps he is going to be sold, but that would be a complete revamping if that happened. Because again, Jesus Ferreira, who part of the issue with Musa was getting them to play together, because Ferreira, kind of like Driussi, not really a 9, not really a 10, definitely an offensive threat, but you have to have other pieces around that player to make him work. And he's off to Seattle now. So for a good chunk of change. So again, Ferreira had been this talismanic player for Dallas, and now he's gone, and they either have to build around Musa, or if they offload Musa somehow, then they have to completely remake that team. Again, for Copa Tejas purposes, that's probably good. Like, we probably like that.
Yeah.
But thinking about the way that the league is reconfiguring the Ilie piece, which I want to get into now, I think is helpful because this is player who is a defensive midfielder. That's definitely a position of need for Austin. And he is older. He's 34. That's worrisome to some, but he seems to still have some miles left in him. And I think is going to be a player that will not only help in terms of his defensive work rate and the things that he does there, but also in terms of his distribution. He's got some similar numbers to Johan Valencia, which I looked at in the article, but also he's much better at distributing. And that's, again, that was a big thing, not only to criticize Valencia's game, but also thinking about when he was in there, kind of how Austin's offense would stagnate versus Alex Ring, who is a little bit more offensive minded, but also maybe not the pure defensive stopper that Valencia is. Sanchez, I think, is going to be a nice hybrid between those two, but also at a slightly higher level. Again, Brandon Vàzquez had really good years with Sporting Kansas City, had really good years with LAFC. You've seen the commercial with the game-winning penalty kick from MLS Cup 2022. So he is definitely a player who knows how to win and is coming into an entirely different situation from LAFC, where trophies are expected, to Austin, where it's the great unknown at this point right now, like what this team is going to be capable of heading into 25.
Him coming out of free agency and having something to prove, that's a theme that we've seen with players like Diego Rubio, others, Maxi Urruti, who had been at God knows how many different teams and had a great overperforming season at Austin. Ilie is the kind of player that I think is very different than Maxi Urruti,
Yeah.
for example. But the similar thing of having something to prove for a player of his caliber, I don't think is going to be a problem. I don't think he's got any sort of doubt in himself. He knows where he is in this stage of his career at this age. It doesn't affect him as much as it does a striker when you're looking at someone of his vintage. I know that some of the concerns that got voiced early on by fans were, he's an old guy, he's retiring, great, put him out to pasture, don't put him on the team. I think that is completely the wrong way to look at Ilie. I think this is a great choice of Ilie by Roto. I think this bodes well. This twosome. Here's what I want to ask you, Phil, that hasn't been addressed in the newsletter yet. A couple weeks before preseason starts, what else do you think gets firmed up before then, or what do you think is most crucial that they fill in more people in specific positions by preseason, assuming that Vàzquez does indeed lock in. With that as an assumption, what other pieces do you think are absolutely essential before preseason starts?
Midfield's still thin, and there's another rumor we're going to talk about in a second here, which might be addressing part of that. But I would say you would probably need one. And again, yeah, with 3 senior roster spots left, we definitely need a midfielder. I still think winger depth is helpful. I would love to see kind of a pure number 10 come in, but I don't quite know how that works necessarily, kind of money wise or position wise, depending on whether this other rumor comes good or not. And again, what happens with Driussi. If Driussi stays on the team, I think that he is going to be relied upon some for 10-like qualities to a certain degree, just because of what Vàzquez brings and him being a pure 9. And again, trying to just make sure that he acclimates. Because again, like you were talking about with strikers, yeah, it can be a little bit more challenging when they get older versus other positions. You're judging them you're judging them on the basis of how much they're scoring. And again, Urruti had this very overperforming 2022, followed by this very underperforming 2023. And then eventually he was off the team as a result of that. So yeah, with Ilie, I don't think it's going to be the same sort of test. And again, just his composition, his makeup, he's been a captain. He very well could be a captain for this team. I do think that he's going to be stable. I think he's definitely, again, capable of 2,000 plus minutes, and I think will be pretty solid. But again, yeah, thinking about another midfielder or two, and then again, maybe like a striker winger hybrid type, just because again, I do think that they are going to need a little bit of striker depth, and I would like to see a little bit more in terms of winger, Obrian, Bukari, maybe Gallagher, maybe Owen in spots with that. But I would feel much better with kind of one more offensive player there. And that's where U22 could really come in and get some minutes and develop and do some good things theoretically.
Yeah, we're going to keep this a pretty short one. Let's go ahead and talk about this rumor, which to qualify it, it isn't something that is considered as certain as even the Pico thing. It's that Austin is interested in the running for this player. Other teams are interested. From the way that this is framed, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't come off to me as something that everybody should be banking on. Everybody should be combing through his entire Instagram history and getting used to what kind of dog he has and where he might hang out in the domain and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so this is Besard Šabović. He is a Swedish player, has most recently played for Djurgårdens as a central midfielder, was born in Macedonia. He has represented both Sweden and North Macedonia at a youth international level. And just a fun fact from Wikipedia here, he took part in a TV show called Football Fabriken, the Football Factory, which plotted the best 15-year-old players in the academy for a unpronounceable team name, which is a Swedish, I'm going to try this here, Broma Pojkarna. So he is a reality show veteran who has played youth international ball. He's played with Sweden, their U21, most recently back in 2020. So it looks like he's off that train, played in the Swedish league. Was rumored to be going to West Brom over the summer, which would have been, again, the caliber of player we're looking at here, right? Maybe not an everyday starter there, but certainly somebody of the caliber where he can be on a fair to Midland team in England, certainly could do well in MLS. And I know that there are also rumors that the Timbers are in for him as well. So there might be some competition there. Again, looking at FB ref things and doing some cursory discussions with some folks that speculate as we do, looks like kind of maybe an Alex Ring type. And again, prime age player, somebody who could theoretically come in and double pivot with Ilie or be kind of a pure 8. Again, thinking about depth, depending on where you're going to deploy Owen Wolf and Danny Pereira and what you're going to do with them, how long they stay maybe. Are they going to be summer exits as they pursue dreams of Europe, or are they going to be core members of the team, which it seems like for the time being they are. But again, it is still relatively early still in the transfer window.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add on this one, but I think it's interesting that we can really clearly see the thinking of how these players would work in rather than have to do a lot of imagination work. It's really clear that this guy would pair really well with Ilie. He would serve a similar purpose to Ring without the miles that Ring has on him, and seems neat. I wouldn't be mad about it. That's the long and the short of how I feel about it. Can I bring up my beloved second team as we're talking about staffing and personnel?
Let's do it. Yeah.
So we've seen some departures. Steve Louis-Jean has left. Alonso Ramirez, who was on loan from Atlas. So technically he was going to leave unless he got a green card and the team bought him or something like that.
Hope, but that did not happen.
Unfortunately. Sebastian Pino and then Brian Ariano. All four of them gone. And seeing the big turnover 2023 into 2024 of various players, 2024 now into 2025, we're seeing something similar. And that's the extent to which, unless you're going to the academy games and you're relentlessly tracking the academy players and that kind of thing, which there are folks out there who do, it feels to me like this is the best insight that we have into the way that Burrell and his staff are reshaping things. He wants the next pro team to get younger. He wants it to be this kind of proving ground for earning those first team contracts. So we'll see how Peter Grogan plays out. We'll see, if Vlad's deal did end up getting done, we'll see how that goes. I feel like this is, it's not that Pinot is bad. It's not that Louis-Jean is bad. Certainly not that Ramirez is bad, and Ariano was promising as well. But it's that they really want to make use of that space for either incredibly deserving academy graduates like Irvin Torres, or bringing in internationals to see if they are worth the international slot having the benefit of the U22 designation. That's the way that it really plainly reads to me, is that rather than panic sign some guy as a U22 on the first team because he's so promising, because he's the next big thing, because he's the next this person or that person, taking this more measured approach of this is a promising looking player who does not have the kind of heat or the, I guess you would say, mega caliber agent who can sell everybody on him being the new version of sliced bread. That to me is what this says. It's not, oh, but Pinot was so promising, but also he was a huge accumulator of cards, and he would have hot spells and then not hot spells. He would get injured relatively frequently, not super seriously, but enough that he just wasn't getting minutes. he wasn't the best when it came to situational awareness, the kind of thing that you want to see players on the next pro team look like they are too good to be playing on the next pro team. You want to see them playing like CJ Fodre. You want to see them playing like Jimmy Farcarlin. You want to see them doing what Micah Burton got back in the groove to doing toward the end of last season. I wish that they publicized signings a bit more. They don't really do that in the Austin FC comms office that much, outside of, hey, this player's here now. Oh, okay, cool, great. So we don't have as much lead time as we do on first team players, but it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I think their season is set as usual to start just a little later than the first team schedule.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, so they'll have a little bit more time to build that. And again, I'm sure once they get the first team roster set, then they'll maybe focus a little more on the second team. Of course, and they're probably going after players simultaneously, can multitask, they can walk and chew gum at the same time. But also, obviously, as we know from all the second team dealings, first team is the priority and second team serves the first team. And in terms of allocation of resources and things like that, they're going to obviously try to get that first team roster set first and foremost, and then see where the second team shakes out. I do think that this is going to be another interesting year too, not only in terms of how Austin's going to use MLS Next Pro and develop those players, but also just kind of where that league is evolving to. Because again, they have started to mix in a couple of independent teams, but for the most part, it is still this bridge between the academy and the first team potentially, and over the years as it's been developing, also serves as a bridge to USL when there are teams that don't quite necessarily, again, players that don't necessarily have what it takes to be full-time MLS starters or even role players, but are aging out and are clearly too good to be an MLS Next Pro, like a Valentin Noel, for example, where I think, like we've talked about before, if he had a green card, I think he would have been, somebody who could have come in on a roster spot, senior roster spot, and contribute here and there, but didn't quite merit the international spot. And again, USL seemed to be the logical place for him. I mean, it was not going to be productive for him to continue to play with 19 and 20-year-olds.
That's all I got, Phil. Do you have anything?
I do. I did a green smoke check. There's still no new green smoke from Precourt, but We Are Austin TV is reporting that Precourt has followed Brandon Vàzquez on social media as we look for breadcrumbs, as we look for little clues as to what's going to happen. That is there. Also, President Biden is going to give a Presidential Medal of Freedom to Lionel Messi. Ran across that courtesy of Bogert on Twitter, which I hardly traffic anymore. So that is something. Yes.
To explain the breadcrumb on the Precourt following, Precourt only follows 512 people. People can figure out why that's the gimmick. So it is something that is trackable. He had to unfollow someone to follow Brandon Vàzquez. So the high science going on at We Are Austin TV continues to astound and amaze me. And Phil, I can't possibly imagine why in these waning days of the Biden administration, Lionel Messi would want to go ahead and get that out of the way before somebody else takes off. Oh, okay. No, I get it now.
Right. Yeah. That just kind of came out of nowhere. Good for him. Good for President Biden for acknowledging what he brings. They did not get an MLS Cup, but he is getting a Presidential Medal of Freedom and a Supporter Shield and a Club World Cup berth out of it. So still a decent year for Messi in 2024 and heading into 2025, despite not doing as well in the playoffs as maybe some had hoped. Miami fans, league officials, Miami players themselves. They're going to be a really interesting story again, too, just in terms of how they get remade. Oh, there is one. If anybody is going to Coachella, which I'm still contemplating, probably will not be going and making the trip just because I'm doing something soccer nerdy the week before, which also requires travel, which I'll definitely be writing about, and I'll talk about that as that gets closer. But the game that was supposed to be scheduled for February 8th between Austin and SKC, which, as we mentioned on the last show, was going to be a weird preview of the season opener with those exact same teams 2 weeks from that point on the 22nd. That has now been changed. So SKC is going to play Minnesota on the Sunday, and our friends from St. Louis City are going to be playing Austin in that same time spot. So it's 11 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Central on Saturday the 8th. We don't know about streaming yet, so if you want to see that, you may need to just get to Coachella in person, but it is a great trip. It is worthwhile. If you can get there, you can enjoy it and take in everything that the Coachella Valley Invitational offers.
Phil, to close things out, what do you think the betting odds are that we get a jersey leak before we record next? Last year, all the jerseys in the league leaked thanks to EAFC. The new MLS ball leaked thanks to the video game. Do you think that as various jerseys for LA Galaxy, LAFC, various other teams are showing up in outlet malls across the country, apparently, what are the odds that the actual design, not the footy headlines mock-up, which I have it on relatively good authority, is not actually reflective of the new Austin FC home kit? How
Thank
likely
goodness
is
for
it?
that.
Thank God, because I don't really like it.
It was bad. It was
The swoops on the sides, I would expect those to exist on there because they're in the template. They'll be in all the new jerseys this year, unfortunately.
Right.
So what's your bet? What do you think we're going to have a jersey leak before we record next? Hopefully by then, of course, we have Brandon Vàzquez confirmed too, right?
Yeah, selfishly, I hope so, just because, again, not only was it fun to see what those jerseys were going to be stupidly through a video game league, but also that was the original emergency. That is how emergency podcast got born into the world. It was a kit leak emergency, and we did a podcast about it, and lo and behold, we just keep doing podcasts after that. I do have kind of a spot in my heart for stupid kit leaks that infuriate the front office. For the front office's sake, yeah, I hope that they can keep it under wraps and do what they do in terms of their reveal. But I do expect that something absolutely stupid is going to happen. And we're going to see a jersey that at least some of us have a relatively good idea of what that looks like, even though it is kind of like third and fourth hand. Neither of us have seen it, to be clear, nor would we. I do think it's going to be well, we shouldn't say what it's going to look like, but it is going to be
less crazy than the barcode, which
less crazy than the barcode. We can say that. Yeah.
That much we
more
know.
Refined.
That much we know.
Is it possible to be any less refined than that?
The thing I will put out there that I've mentioned to a couple of folks is that the thing that I've wanted and the thing that I've been told has a high probability of happening. Is the piping on the shoulders. It's going to be
where's Phil
for the first time.
Okay.
That I'll let escape.
Okay.
And just note how completely that does not look like the footy headlines mock-up. We'll see how my sources play out. I have a high degree of confidence, especially based on things that we have been told by people inside the front office who rate it as their favorite jersey so far. That is no small compliment. So expectations raised to the stratosphere. It can't possibly be as bad as LAFC's collared kit with gold coming out of the armpits. Gold pit stains. The pit stain golf shirt. That's what LAFC got.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. All right. We will not disparage kits any further or do any more kind of quasi reveals or anything like that. We are still waiting, of course, for Vàzquez. We might do something quick when that actually happens. Although, again, I just wrote close to 3,500 words on that with the help of two fine folks. Do read that if you haven't yet. Get your kind of fill of what could be. And then we will come next time, hopefully with some more news about signings or developments. And as we're getting close to camp opening, we're getting close to players reporting back.
Yeah.
So actual live bodies at STPC to report on, to talk about. The season is less than 50 days away now. So that's exciting and alarming. Mostly exciting, but also a little alarming as well.
Yeah, you just said something that made me think. Get your fill. That was a rejected name for Verde all day. That was one that was in contention. Didn't make it.
I did not.
Almost got.
I did
there.
not.
Almost made it over the finish line.
Yeah, I did not intend that. Nor did I intend. Yeah, I was texting with my wife today, and for some reason, it just texted Gettysburg on its own.
Yeah,
I have no idea why.
No, autocorrect has gotten 1,000% worse on iPhones since iOS 17.
But this was like a weird pocket text where it just said Gettysburg, and my wife, who clearly hangs around me too long, said, "Yeah, I was going to address that."
Wow. Mine randomly gave me Potemkin the other day. I don't remember what it was. I think I was typing potential, but in what world would I mean to type Potemkin instead of potential? I don't know.
You're talking about Mandy, maybe?
Not Patinkin. Potemkin is in Battleship Potemkin. Come on, man. Get with your Russian cinema.
Right. Always. That's what we do here. So next time we're going to do an entire deep dive on Russian cinema.
Yeah.
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.